We are on page 42, Book 1, Canto 3, The Yoga of the Soul's Release. And we are towards the end of the page. Last week we ended with Ashwapati's experiencing this grand reversal of the night and day. And all the world's values have changed for him. This wiser word, this larger thought came in. And therefore, he could perceive a presence and a greatness everywhere. It is so important for us to understand the terms Sri Aurobindo uses. And I believe I quoted one passage from a letter of Sri Aurobindo to a disciple, defining the word presence. It is intended by the word presence to indicate the sense and perception of the divine as being, as a being, felt as present in one's existence and consciousness, or in relation with it, without the necessity of any further qualification or description. It's very important, you see, because in many of the philosophies in India, the presence of the divine was immanent, untouchable, extremely vast. And here Sri Aurobindo is saying that we should understand the word presence to indicate the sense and perception of the divine as a being, felt present in one's existence. Thus, of the ineffable presence, it can only be said that it is there, and nothing more can or need be said about it. Although at the same time, one knows that all is there, personality and impersonality, and light and ananda, and everything else, and that all these flow from that indescribable presence. So we will continue now. And we ended with be but a living movement of the body of God. So we begin. A spirit hid in forces and in forms was the spectator of the mobile scene. The beauty and the ceaseless miracle let in a glow of the unmanifest. The formless, everlasting moved in it. And then we go to the next page. Seeking its own perfect form in souls and things. Life kept no more a dull and meaningless shape. In the struggle and upheaval of the world, he saw the labor of the Godhead's birth. So we know that Ashwapati is Sri Aurobindo. And it is Sri Aurobindo speaking to us in the form of the persona of Ashwapati. And he's seeing that Everything is seeking its own perfect form in souls and things. And therefore, life kept no more a dull and meaningless shape. You see, we have so many nihilists in the world, feeling that life is meaningless. But Ashwapati has not seen this at all. He's seen exactly the opposite. Everything seeking its own perfection. In the struggle and upheaval of the world, he saw the labor of a Godhead's birth. Well, in the Life Divine, Sri Aurobindo tells us that the One is here, transcendent, immobile, and when he decides to become the many, he reduces his power and becomes the many. So he is the one in the many, and the many are in the one. And so we see this labor of the Godhead's birth, because in the next line, a secret knowledge masked as ignorance. Well, this is the plane that we are in at present, the plane of body, life, and mind. The lower hemisphere, we could say. Because when we rise into the spiritual planes of consciousness, there is no more duality, no more separation. We are all one. Yes, in varying degrees, because there are many planes in this spiritual region. The higher mind, the illumined mind, the intuitive mind, the overmind, and finally the supermind. So he saw the labor of a Godhead's birth, a secret knowledge masked as ignorant. So this word masked is very important, because if all is the divine, how can there be ignorance? But masked as ignorance. So in this subliminal state, or the inconscience, there seems to be ignorance, but it's masked. It's just behind everything. A secret knowledge masked as ignorance. Fate covered with an unseen necessity, the game of chance of an omnipotent will. Well, there is no chance, Sri Aurobindo tells us in most of his books. But it's a game. It's a game the Lord is playing with himself to see when he can throw himself out into these billions of souls, how he can come back through them to the oneness and the beauty of a new life, which is what Sri Aurobindo and Mother have worked for all those years. The leap from the current evolution to a new status of consciousness, which he named the supermind. So it's a game of chance, of an omnipotent will. And this will, in the Life Divine, he tells us, the energy that creates the world can be nothing else than a will. And will is only consciousness applying itself to a work and a result. Will is the pressure of a conscious force on nature. And again, that was from Letters on Yoga, and one more from the Life Divine. What becomes desire in the ego is will in the spirit. A glory and a rapture and a charm. The all-blissful sat unknown within the heart. Sri Aurobindo has used all hyphen, blissful, all affirming, all beautiful, all causing, all delight, all knowing throughout Savitri. Because when he hyphenates a word, it becomes a new word. And so we have to understand the all-blissful is the divinity, the divine presence. The all-blissful sat unknown within the heart. Earth's pains were the ransom of its prisoned delight. Extraordinary line. Earth's pains were the ransom of its prisoned delight. And we are held captive here, and we have to suffer the pains of earth so that we can grow. And that's the ransom of our prisoned delight. A glad communion tinged the passing hours. Tinged, a trace, sort of like a tint in thought or feeling. The days were travelers on a destined road, the nights companions of his musing spirit. This is, of course, Sri Aurobindo again, telling us the days were travelers, but on a destined road. Everything in life is destined. There is no random chance. However, that destiny is fluid because we have karma behind us, the karma of many, many lives. And so it's a destined road, and the nights were companions of Ashwapati's musing spirit. A heavenly impetus quickened all his breast, an impetus, an impelling force, an impulse. The trudge of time changed to a splendid march. Now, what is this trudge of time? Well, a trudge is a long, tiring, or exhausting walk. And for us, for many of us, time can be a trudge. We have to go through so many things in this life. We have to go through illness, the death of loved ones, the birth of children. So for Ashwapati, the trudge of time changed to a splendid march. The divine dwarf towered to unconquered worlds. Now, what is this divine dwarf? Well, as I've told some of you who have been with me previously, I would go to the oldest ashramites and ask them to define certain terms that Sri Aurobindo did not specifically define. So from Amal Kiran, K.D. Setna, he says, the divine dwarf is the psychic being in its initial state. Nolini says, it is the divine as Vamana, as someone doing austerities. And Madhav Pandit told me, the allusion is to Vamana, the Vamana avatar in Indian mythology. Vamana, the dwarf, Lilliputian, very, very small in form, asks for a boon of 3 steps of land from the king. The king readily agrees. Suddenly, the dwarf assumes a stupendous shape and occupies both the worlds of earth and heaven, and asks where he should place his 3rd step. The king is obliged to offer his head. The Titan yields to the divine in the form of Vamana. And Purani, who was a good friend and wrote the book Savitri, An Approach and a Study. And he says the divine dwarf is an incarnation of Vishnu, who measured the 3 worlds, the material, the vital, and the mental. So we now understand the divine dwarf. Earth grew too narrow for his victory. Once only registering the heavy tread of a blind power on human littleness, life now became a sure approach to God. Existence, a divine experiment, and cosmos, the soul's opportunity. So important, these 3 lines. Life itself must become for us a sure approach to God. Existence, our existence, a divine experiment. And cosmos, the soul's opportunity. The world was a conception and a birth of spirit in matter into living forms. Matter seems to be unconscious, but it is not. The spirit is in matter, as it is in the plant life and the animal life. Only there is not the capacity of the mind in matter or in plants or in animals. They do have feelings. There have been many, many experiments on plants to assure us that the plant has very deep feelings. Bose began it in India, and there were 2 fellows in America who wrote a book, The Secret Life of Plants, where they had a philodendron here and a pot of boiling water next to it, and they poured shrimp into the water, and the plant shook from the pain of those shrimp poured into the water. Animals too have deep feelings, and they even have such deep feelings that when they are saved by a person, they can become a lifelong friend. So the world was a conception and a birth of spirit in matter into living forms. What does Sri Aurobindo tell us about the spirit? Because he capitalizes the word spirit here in this line of spirit in matter into living forms. So in one of his letters on yoga, he says, the spirit is the consciousness above mind, the Atman, or self, which is always in oneness with the divine. And in Essays on the Gita, he writes, what we mean by spirit is self-existent being with an infinite power of consciousness and unconditioned delight in its being. Oh. Spirit is the soul and reality of that which we sense as matter. Matter is a form and body of that which we realize as spirit. And in his Essays on the Gita, again, he says, the spirit is the supreme being in his infinite consciousness. And the supreme nature is the infinity of power or will of being of the spirit. And lastly, in his essays in philosophy and yoga, he writes, the spirit is the truth of our being. Mind and life and body, in their imperfection, are its masks, but in their perfection should be its molds. But in that line, he also says, of spirit in matter into living forms. So we need to know what Sri Aurobindo means by matter, because he expounded this long before science knew it. And he wrote, matter is by no means fundamentally real. It is a structure of energy. Science now agrees. Science is agreeing that there is a consciousness. But in the Life Divine, what Sri Aurobindo says again, the creative energy in matter is a movement of the power of the spirit. Matter itself cannot be the original and ultimate reality. So science had to throw out this idea that only by the senses, empiric knowledge, we could understand the creation, the cosmos, the senses, the five senses. Matter means the involution of the conscious delight of existence in self-oblivious force and in a self-dividing, infinitesimally disaggregated form of substance. That's from the Synthesis of Yoga. So we know that everything in life is vibration. We are all vibrating. This chair is not really a chair. We see it as a chair, but it is just a form of atoms forming something that says to us, it is a chair. So we'll continue on now. And nature bore the immortal in her womb. Very, very important line. Because the divine Shakti, when she comes down from her imminent, immobile position, she enters as nature. But nature is not totally conscious. Nature is constantly experimenting. She destroys this and she builds this. She gets rid of the dinosaurs and all these other creatures and brings on something else. So nature is bearing the immortal consciousness in her womb. That she might climb through him to eternal life. Now, again, about Ashwapati. His being lay down in bright, immobile peace, and bathed in wells of pure spiritual light. It wandered in wide fields of wisdom self, lit by the rays of an everlasting sun. Even his body's subtle self within could raise the earthly parts towards higher things and feel on it the breath of heavenlier air. Now, Sri Aurobindo has defined for us the subtle body, and that's very important. The terminology of yoga recognizes, besides the status of our physical and vital being, termed the gross body, and doubly composed of the food sheath and the vital vehicle, besides the status of our mental being, termed the subtle body, and singly composed of the mind sheath or mental vehicle, a third termed the causal body, and composed of a fourth and a fifth vehicle, which are described as those of knowledge and bliss, Sat, Chit, Ananda, could raise the earthly parts towards higher things and feel on it the breath of heavenlier air. Already it journeyed towards divinity. Upbuoyed upon winged winds of rapid joy, upheld to a light it could not always hold. Now I have to slow down here a little bit to talk to you about some definitions. To upbuoy, upbuoyed, means to support, to sustain, also to raise, to lift, to cause to rise up. Upheld to a light it could not always hold. And here, once again, I have to talk to you about this light, because Sri Aurobindo gives us the most extraordinary definition of light. In the hour of God, he writes, our sense, by its incapacity, has invented darkness. In truth, there is nothing but light. Only it is the power of light either above or below our poor human vision's limited range. For do not imagine that light is created by the suns. The suns are only physical concentrations of light, but the splendor they concentrate for us is self-born and everywhere. God is everywhere, and wherever God is, there is light. The mother wrote a note to a dear friend of mine, Dmitri von Morenschild, who lived in the ashram to the age of 100. And she wrote him this note, which he gave to me. The light is everywhere. The force is everywhere. And the world is so small. Forms he descried, our mortal eyes see not. To descry something, to discern, to look carefully at it, to discover, to perceive. Forms he descried, our mortal eyes see not. His wide eyes bodied, viewless entities. Now, the word bodied here is a little different from what we understand it. It means gave shape to, almost gave a bodily form to. His wide eyes bodied, viewless entities. He saw the cosmic forces at their work and felt the occult impulse behind man's will. Now, Sri Aurobindo tells us that the word occult is not the definition that the Western psychologists give it. In India, it simply means hidden. He saw the cosmic forces at their work and felt the occult impulse behind man's will. Time's secrets were to him an oft-read book. The records of the future and the past outlined their excerpts on the etheric page. This is a little complex. What are these records of the future and the past? Well, Sri Aurobindo and Mother tells us that everything that happens on the earth, in thought or in action, is in a place called the Akashic Records, in this etheric space. So the Akashic Records contain everything we have done in past lives and everything we are doing in this life. The records of the future and the past outlined their excerpts on the etheric page. Now, science has not yet reached the understanding that there is an ether above our senses, and that so much takes place in this etheric atmosphere. One and harmonious by the Maker's skill, the human in him paced with the divine. So now, Ashapati, or Sri Aurobindo, is growing in his awareness of his consciousness and becoming closer to the avatar he will be. His acts betrayed not the interior flame. So, in the early days, Sri Aurobindo was the leader of the fight for India against the British. Later on, he became, what shall we say, an attendant to the Gaikwar of Baroda. So, we don't know who we are until we become aware of the divinity within us. And how do we become aware of that divinity? Only by rising above this level of ignorance, body, life, and mind, to the spiritual realms of consciousness. His acts betrayed not the interior flame. That flame is in all of us. In India, we know it as Agni. In the beginning of our existence, Agni may be just a little spark. But as we grow through successive lives, it becomes a small flame, and eventually a great flame. When I first met Mother, and she asked me, "Do you want to talk or meditate?" I said, "Meditate, Mother." And I knew nothing about meditation. So I closed my eyes, and suddenly I began to burn. And the fire started in me from below and rose higher and higher and higher until it was a huge flame. But it didn't burn. And it was so powerful that I fell at Mother's feet, and I wept and I wept, maybe 5 or 10 minutes. His acts betrayed not the interior flame. This forged the greatness of his front to earth. A genius heightened in his body's cells that knew the meaning of his fate-hedged works. Yes, we all have fate. We have to face our fate in this life and the fate or karma of past lives. That is fate. We have to face so many things in this life. We have to face anger, unkindness, coldness, bitterness, pain, illness, death. A genius heightened in his body's cells that knew the meaning of his fate-hedged works. Akin to the march of unaccomplished powers, beyond life's arc, in spirit's immensities. This is where he is. Akin means having the same properties, allied by nature. So akin to the march of unaccomplished powers, beyond life's arc, in spirit's immensities. What is happening? What is happening? Apart he lived in his mind's solitude, a demigod shaping the lives of men. One soul's ambition lifted up the race. A power worked, but none knew whence it came. Well, a demigod is an inferior deity. He's not quite a divine avatar as yet, because there are 2 cantos in Book 1, and we are only in the canto 3, where Sri Aurobindo is gaining all these powers, all these experiences, and still he's a demigod shaping the lives of men. One soul's ambition lifted up the race. A power worked, but none knew whence it came. The universal strengths were linked with his, filling earth's smallness with their boundless breadths. He drew the energies that transmute an age. I'll just do 4 more lines and we'll break. Immeasurable by the common look, he made great dreams a mold for coming things, and cast his deeds like bronze to front the years. His walk through time outstripped the human stride. And to end, we'll read the last line. Lonely his days, and splendid like the sun's. What does Sri Aurobindo say about time? He says, time is a manifestation of the eternal. Time is a field of circumstances and forces, meeting and working out a resultant progression whose course it measures. To the ego, it is a tyrant or a resistance. Yes, we don't like time so much. I have so little time left to do this. Oh, it's getting time to pass away. I have illness. I don't like this time. To the divine, he says, it's an instrument. Therefore, while our effort is personal, time appears as a resistance, for it presents to us all the obstruction of the forces that conflict with our own. When the divine working and the personal are combined in our consciousness, it appears as a medium and a condition. When the two become one, it appears as a servant and an instrument. Thank you all. Namaste. If there are any questions, please feel free to ask them. Because next week we begin Canto 4, one of my favorite cantos in Savitri. And there is so much to share in this great canto. It is called The Secret Knowledge. So I hope all of you can come next week to learn of the secret knowledge.